But we would be amazed that we're still able to cope with life if we knew the whole story. And as I was thinking about these people in the life of Jesus, and now we are talking about their stories, do you know what the sad part about finding out about finding out what a person's life is like? It's always after they pass away. You know that? You never hear their stories as they're going on through life. We only hear them afterwards. And whenever I do a funeral, I always think of the obituary as a small biography of their lives. Because you learn in a few short sentences what their life was like. Like, I'm going to read one to you. I'm going to do this funeral tomorrow. But I was just reading through it just the other day. We're going to call her Marjorie. Okay, Marjorie graduated from Central High School in 1952 and married Elmer Smith Jr. on February 16th, 1952. I don't quite know how those numbers add up, but that's okay. Marjorie worked at the seed company, Stoner's Fund Store, with her dad, brother, and sometimes her husband, and retired from Lincoln Life Insurance Company. Marjorie liked baking, knitting, going out to eat with friends and family. She loved her friends, family, and church family from Stokes Chapel in Montgomery, Michigan, and their dog, Lucy.
And thank you for speaking our daughter-in-law's grandmother's.
Say that again?
Thank you for speaking at my daughter-in-law's grandmother's funeral.
Really? I did not know that. Was that Cheryl? Man, I had a great conversation with her yesterday afternoon. We could have talked for a long time, just she and I. Yeah.
Cheryl and Candace is our daughter-in-law. Cheryl is her mother.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very interesting. But it's always sad that we got to wait until someone passes away in order to hear their life story. That's really sad, but that's kind of where we are today in this genealogy of Jesus. Now, we've been working through Matthew chapter 1 through all these names because every one of those names has a story behind them. And last week we looked at a lot of stories, and we're going to finish up today on this life of Jesus. But you know what I realized? I see a lot of the same characteristics that I have in my son. And he sees a lot of his characteristics in his son. But I'm going to make a statement here, and I'm open to anybody who could, show me differently. But you know what? Of all the people in the genealogy of Jesus, Jesus never took on any one of their attributes. I mean, you had Joseph or David, who was a womanizer. You had all these kind of people, and yet he said this: I and the Father are one. He looked past his whole genealogy back to heaven and said, that's who I'm going to follow. That's who's in my bloodline. This is who it is. And Jesus always acted like his Father, the Heavenly Father, but he never took on any of the characteristics of the people in this family tree. I find that fascinating. And yet, all of us in this room, if we look back at our grandparents and back through our family tree, we're probably going to find some of their characteristics in us that we heard about in our family tree. So what I want to do is, last week we stopped with Solomon. I just want to go back and do a couple things about him, and then I'm going to do a couple more people, and then I'm going to turn it over to a Old Testament scholar, and they're going to carry us the rest of the way through this genealogy of Jesus. Okay, so we started with Solomon. Solomon was the last great king of Israel. Okay, now can you tell me who the other two great kings of Israel were? David. Who? Saul. Saul, David, and Solomon are the three greatest kings that Israel had. David made them a great military nation. Solomon made them a very prosperous nation. In fact, gold was so prevalent in their country, and silver was like, who keeps silver? You know, it was that prosperous. And yet, Saul was the last great king, but when you read the book of Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes is his search for happiness. He had everything. I mean, there's nothing that he would want for, and yet he writes the book of Ecclesiastes looking for happiness. Ecclesiastes. Song of Solomon is about his love affair with a woman from somewhere else. I can't think what the name of the country is, but he really liked her, and he went after her. So that... No. I can't think what her name is, but it's like, it's their love story. And but then he wrote Ecclesiastes, which is his search for happiness, and he boils it down like this here. I'm going to put it, in these words here, he'd say, love God, hate sin. Although that's not in the whole in Ecclesiastes, but he wrote just love God, and that's who he was. Now Solomon has a son. His son's name is Rehoboam. This is where everything changes in the nation of Israel. Solomon is now off the scene, and Rehoboam now is there. The elders come to Rehoboam and say, listen, your dad taxed us so bad. The tax was so heavy. Would you please reduce the taxes and reduce the pressure on us? And so Rehoboam says, go away for a couple of days, and I'm going to consult with my advisors, and we're going to find out what we should do. Well, they're all young people. Okay? He comes back the next day and says, no, we're going to make the taxes higher. We're going to put more pressure on you. If you think my dad was bad with taxes, I'm going to make it worse. And at that moment, the nation of Israel split. And from then on, there's always a civil war going on between Israel and, you read about Judah, okay? Israel went north. And Judah and a tribe named Benjamin, they stayed in the south. And from then on, Israel didn't have too many good kings. In fact, they're pretty terrible. And so when that happens to Rehoboam, everything splits. They have a number of kings. Now, this book in Matthew, these people, they don't cover every king. They skip some people. So when it says there's 14 generations or whatever it is, he only lists the number of people. It isn't always in order. He skips some generations. It just kind of takes the tops. So then we come to a man named Jehoshaphat. What I want you to know about this king is this. When he would go out to war, do you know who he would send out first? The worship team. They would go out and praise the Lord for the battle that's going to happen. And they would sing, and he'd win all the battles. It's like, I did not know this, but the other night when they had that parade of all the military a couple of weeks ago, I always wondered why they had what they call drum and fife people going out first. You know why that was? Because the way the drum sounded is where people would, that was their only way of communicating with each other where to go to war, was by the sound about the drums. And the fife, whatever it is, that little instrument they played, how they would play would call people to the battle. I thought that was fascinating. That's what Jehoshaphat would do. He would send out the worship team, and they would go out and lead in worship, and they'd win the battles. So here's the question: when you and I are facing a battle in our lives, what should we do? Do we always do that? No. But it's in the Bible. And I try to, but I don't always win. All right? So now we leave Jehoshaphat and we come to a whole new set of kings. And I'm going to ask Nancy, because she has just taught on all these people, and she's going to take us through the rest of the kings there in this line. Do you need a microphone?
Do I need a microphone? I'm getting no. I can talk loud. I know it does nice to have a microphone, but.
You want this in here?
No, I'm okay. I wouldn't mind if you turn to 2 Kings 18. My poor excuse of a map, but we've used this over and over. But so Israel was divided into the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. And so we're now going to be talking about southern, and which is Judah. And this is where Jerusalem is. So this is the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. And so this is where Hezekiah is now the king. Hezekiah, it says in 2 Kings 18, it says that Hezekiah was a great king. And I love this in verse 5. So 2 Kings 18:5. Are you there? Okay. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not cease to follow him. He kept the commands of the laws of Moses. There was nobody better before him or after him. And so, always, every time we started a book of any of the kings, it always started with either he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, or he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Every time. It just never failed. That's how they started with every king, telling them what would they like. They did right or they did evil. And so, but Hezekiah, he reigned for 25 years, and he was good throughout. And what it means is he tore down all the idols. These Israelites were just so known for just having idols. God kept saying, I just want you to worship me. Just me alone. But they just had to have their idols. Now, if you remember when they came down, when they left Egypt, and they were down at Mount Sinai, and Moses went up to the mountain, they were waiting for Moses, and Aaron built a golden calf. I don't know if it all started there, where they started getting this idea that we got to have idols. They wanted something tangible, I think. Something they could look at. But it started where they kept having all these different kind of idols. Well, Hezekiah was like, we got to get rid of these idols. So he would tear them down. When he talks about high places, it was just meaning up something up high. And so he tore them down. Well, there's a lot of battles he won. And as we go through, it kind of comes to the end of his life, but he gets really sick. And also at this time, Isaiah, this is where we first meet Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah comes along, and he's alongside Hezekiah. And Hezekiah is sick, and Isaiah says, because the Lord told him, you're going to die. You're going to die from this sickness. So he goes in, and fun to tell the king that, right? Yeah, Hezekiah, you're going to die from this. Well, Hezekiah turns to the wall, and he cries. And he cries to God and said, God, I have followed you. I have done everything right in your eyes. Please, I'm not ready to die. Please let me live longer. So God heard his voice, and he kind of melted. And so he went back to Isaiah, and he said, go back to Hezekiah and tell him, I'm going to let you live longer. I'm going to give you 15 more years. So Isaiah went and found Hezekiah. Those two words are so hard to keep going back and forth. He went back and he said, Hezekiah, God told me God's going to give you 15 more years. Well, in those 15 years, he had 2 more kids. And one of them was, we don't hear about the second one, but that First one was not good. So he gave him the 15 more years, and he had this son called Manasseh. But before that, while he was sick, he had some visitors from Babylon. So Babylon is now way over here in what we consider either Iran or Iraq right now. So Babylon comes with a get well card in the form of people. And he's so proud of everything he has. All those riches from King Solomon's temple, he wants to show him everything. It's like opening the bank vault, basically. It's like taking him over to Bippus Bank and saying, here, I'm going to open all the vaults and I'm going to show you everything we've got in here. And the next day, Isaiah comes and he taps him on the shoulder. He said, who are those guys? Oh, those guys were from the king of Babylon. And he said, well, what did they want? Well, they sent me a get well card. And they just wanted to come tell me get well soon. And he goes, well, what did you show them? Well, I just showed them everything we've got. Showed them all the beautiful things we have. I opened up the vault and showed them all the wonder, how rich we are, all the gold and all, just everything we have. Isn't it? I mean, I'm so proud of everything we have. I just wanted to show it to them all. Isaiah said, oh, but now Babylon is going to come and take it all away from you. Well, that is what happened. So, now we're on to, so let's see. Hezekiah, he was allowed 15 more years to live after he got sick. He showed the Babylonians all the treasures of Judah. So now, the time has ended for his 15 years are up. So now has Manasseh. Manasseh's 12 years old when he becomes king. He is now the worst king. Dad was the greatest king, but Manasseh was the worst king. What makes him the worst king? Well, he rebuilt everything that Hezekiah tore down. He destroyed everything that Hezekiah rebuilt. There were detestable idols that he put back up. He sacrificed his own son. It was the first time that children were sacrificed. And he started it. It's still going on today. And it was with his own son, if you can imagine that. He introduced child sacrifices. Not only that he brought back idol worship, he brought it into the temple. So if you can think of the most detestable things, he brought it here, and he brought it right here on the platform of the synagogue, the church, the temple, whatever was that. Wherever you come to worship your God, he brought it right up in the front. So he really led the people astray. 55 years he is the king. So it's a long time to have an evil king. You know, we panic when we have 4 years of a rotten president. But to have to live for 55 years. Now, what's really interesting is in Kings, when you read about King Manasseh, the story ends with him being bad. But if you turn over to 2nd Chronicles 33, Chronicles, sometimes I think that Christians, because I was one of them, maybe you were one too, that you're like, oh, I'm not going to read Chronicles because it's the same stories that I just read in Kings, because it really kind of just mirrors everything that was just told in the Kings. But 2nd Chronicles tells a different story about the ending. I did not know that because I kept hearing sermons about Manasseh and how bad he was. And then I read 2nd Chronicles and I'm like, Daryl, look at this. This ends totally different. And I just was totally amazed at this. And So here Manasseh is taken captive by the king of Assyria. Assyria comes in and takes him captive, puts a hook through his nose. I find that, I don't know why, I just find that interesting that he uses a hook to put through his nose, and he takes him captive for a number of years. But in that time, God gets a hold of his heart, and he realizes who God really is. And he submits his life back to God. God comes, the king of Assyria lets him go, and he comes back, and God gives him his kingdom back. We read that in Chronicles, but Kings never tells us that. So I find that just awesome that he gets his kingdom back. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me no matter how bad you are, no matter how long you've lived in sin, God always will restore you. It also tells me train up a child in the way it should go, and when it gets old, he will return. I want to give you hope today. You can think your child is so gone, so gone. Hezekiah had to have trained him in the right way. He was a great king. He had to have trained him in the right way. And I'm sure if he was living, he would have think there's no hope for Manasseh. There's no hope. But see, what we do train our children in. You may be dead and gone before your child comes back to God. But there's a promise there. You know, there's times that Daryl says, remember the promises that God has given you? And maybe you go home and because I did, I went home and I was like, what promises have you given me, God? I don't know what promises you've given me. And then I'm like, then I have to go back to the Bible and say, what promises are in the Bible? I have to hang on to those promises. And so this is a promise that is in the Bible. And so I just want to encourage you today, no matter what kind of sin, when Satan comes to you and says, you've been too bad, you'll never be what God wants you to be because you've just lived in sin too long. You remember Manasseh. When you think of your children, you think they've lived in sin too long. You remember Manasseh. Manasseh to me is a wonderful story. So what was our notes on Manasseh? He came back to God. So, okay, now we have Josiah. Josiah, he became a king at 8 years old. Can you imagine ruling a country at 8 years old? Think of your 8-year-old grandchild. I wouldn't want to do much, huh? Yeah. So, while he is reigning, they are remodeling the temple. This is something I don't think, as you're reading the Bible, you probably don't realize, but they hadn't been looking at the law of Moses for years. So while they're going through and remodeling, one of the high priests finds, maybe in the wall, who knows where they found it, because it's not really specific, but they find a book, and there it is, dusty, and the high priest maybe doesn't exactly know what it is, and he finds this book, and what is this thing? Is this what I think it is? And he goes and tells another high priest. He says, look what I found. Look what I found. And they take it to King Josiah. And King Josiah rips his clothes off. That always means in the Bible that I'm in agony, that I just realized something. And he realizes this is the book of Moses, the law of Moses. And what he looks at when he reads it is, look how we've been living, how we have been disobeying God's rules and his laws. And he realizes how awful. And that they have not been doing what God has been saying for years. And so he has it read out loud to everybody. And says, we've got to start following our God, our almighty God. Trouble is, you can't make people do anything. They have to feel it. So he tries, but they have to feel it on their own. But he tries his hardest, and But anyway, so that's when the law of Moses comes back, and I believe, don't they have Passover for the first time in a long time? So, yep.
Aren't you going?
No, you didn't tell me to go on.
Okay.
I know you said it here, but I'm like, I'm not going on. You just told me the three.
Okay, all right.
Hope you're ready.
Yeah, I am. I thought you was gonna go away, so I took my microphone off, I'll talk loud. One of the last kings in Judah is a man by the name of Jeconiah. When Babylon took over, one of the first things that nations always do is change people's names so that they want you to forget your past. Like when we read the book of Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, that wasn't their real names. They changed their names for hoping they would forget their past. So what happened was Babylon came in and took over Judah, and they changed Jeconiah's name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah in his reign, they rebelled against Babylon. So Babylon came back in and took him captive. And here's what they did. Yeah, he was the last king of Judah, and then here's what they did to Jeconiah. I don't know how many sons he had, let's say 3. They killed every one of his sons in front of him, then gouged his eyes out. For the reason that is the last thing they wanted him to see, was his whole family decimated. And he goes into captivity for 70 years. And so he's the last king of Judah, and and his sons were killed in front of him. Now between that sentence and a guy named Zerubbabel is 70 years. They've gone through a number of changes in government. Now they're under, I think, the Medes and the Persians. Who are the Persians today?
Iranians.
Iran. You know that I realized just that I read the other day, they changed the name from Persia to Iran in 1935. I didn't know that. 1935 they changed the name to Iran. Up until then it was always Persia. Well, there's a new leader of Persia named Darius. And he allows Israel to go back and begin to rebuild their life back in Judah. And so a man named Zerubbabel, he's very instrumental in helping them rebuild the temple, their place of worship. But he could trace his line back to King David. He was a descendant of King David. And he's very instrumental in helping them rebuild the temple. And then although he's not in the genealogy of Jesus, there's a man named Nehemiah who comes along and he rebuilds the outside wall of Jerusalem, but Zerubbabel was in charge of helping them rebuild the temple. You see, all of these people, and there's a lot of names in there that we didn't go over. These are just some of the highlights. It's like people in your life. You all probably don't get down to see like what your second and third and fourth uncle was like, but you always hear about the good ones and the bad ones. You know? Go ahead.
I think the exciting thing was when I was studying Manasseh, and I was telling Daryl how he had come back to the Lord and everything, and then Daryl said, Manasseh's in the genealogy of Jesus. And I don't think I hadn't paid attention to that before, that he was in the genealogy. And to think that this wicked king of 55 years was in the genealogy of Jesus was exciting to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
It goes back to the 2 statements I gave you last week. One was, when you read this study, if God will include all these good and bad and whatever kind of people in his genealogy, he'll accept us. There's nothing, like Nancy said, there's nothing bad enough that we've done that God can't accept us. There's nothing that you've done that God can't accept you into his kingdom, into his family. And the second statement was this. God uses, what's the phrase I use? God uses bad people because you know why? There aren't any others. You know, there's only one good person on earth, and they had him crucified. Otherwise, we're all just a product of our family trees, and we all aren't good. And every one of us has a story. And here's what I want to leave with you today. Your story is so important to pass on to the next generation in your family. Now, I come from a family that we were storytellers. My dad could tell us the best stories about his life I would just, and I told you this before, when I was a little kid, when his brothers would come to the house, I would stay up all night if I could and just listen to him tell all the stories. And now we get together with my family, my brothers and sisters, and guess what we do? Talk about our dad. All the stories he did, things he told us, things that weren't too good, things he made us do. It's like, okay, I'm not sure why he did that, but I want to tell you, hand your story down to the next generation. This is why we as believers have to grow in the Lord, because when folks come into the church, they have to see how we made it through. Because you know what? They're going to face the very same struggles that we did. And they need some tracks to run on. That's why we're here. That's why these stories are in the Bible. That's why all these people are here. They teach us so much. And now we're going to find out about the earthly father of Jesus, Joseph. He's the product of this family tree, because you see a lot of traits in him that are in this genealogy of Jesus. But what I want you to carry away from this study in this genealogy is that, man, God's grace is so magnificent that he would include us. That he would look at us and say, I want them for part of my family. I want them in the kingdom. And when we said yes, he became our father. And he is a good, good father. I want to close this way this morning, and I'm going to give Nancy a challenge. And I'm hoping she can play the song. Because this has been going through my mind as I listen to her. And